Good morning. My name is Dr. Toni Moreno. Today is June 30th, 2025. I am in Austin, Texas at UT interviewing my dad, Rudy Moreno, for the Voces Oral History Project. Thank you, Dad, for agreeing to interview for our project.
It was my pleasure.
Please know that if there are any topics you don't wish to discuss, you will not have to discuss them. Also, if there is something you wish to discuss, we want to hear from you. If at any point you wish to stop the camera to get a drink or use the facilities, please let me know.
Okay, will do.
As we said earlier, your interview will be housed at the Nettie Lee Benson Library at the University of Texas at Austin campus. So let's begin.
Okay.
Tell me about your childhood. What was your daily life like?
Childhood growing up in the 50s as a Hispanic was rough. My earliest memories as far as being denigrated or being called an American was being called wet feet by a young classmate, which surprised me, and this was probably first or second grade, that anybody at that age would know about Hispanic people coming across the Rio Grande, and therefore being called wet feet, and not so much me, but referring to all the Hispanics in general. So again, and then growing up in the 60s, it still carried on. Growing up in New Mexico, the high school that I went to, you had your Hispanics stand on one side, they had the Anglo stand on the other side. So again, you had this disparity, this thing about, this is your place and this is their place. So it wasn't the best of times to grow up, and still isn't. And with the current administration, it seems to be going back to the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s.
Did you have, or do you have any siblings, and did they share the same experiences?
Even more so, especially my older brother. When we lived in New Mexico, I remember as a youth, we lived on a ranch outside of town, so we would come into town on, maybe once a month, twice a month, to go shopping, to do, get haircuts, get clothes and whatnot. And there was this one particular time that, as I was getting a haircut, my brother steps in, my older brother, and he's a little bit darker than I am. He looks more Hispanic than I do. So as I was getting a haircut in the chair, my brother walks in, and the barber looks at him and he says, "I'm sorry, we don't cut Mexican people's hair." So he left, and when he was through, when the guy was through cutting my hair, I thanked him and I said, "Well, thank you for cutting this Hispanic's hair." And I had one cousin that told me one time that I was very fortunate, and I said, "Why is that?" He said, "You could pass for white." And that's, to me, I look as Hispanic as anybody else, but in his eyes, my cousin's eyes, I was very fortunate to not look Hispanic. So I don't know if that was a plus or a minus, but anyway, yeah, it was a sign of the times.
Did you have any other siblings growing up?
I've got an older brother that's still alive, thank God, and I have a younger brother that died November of last year.
How were your days with them? How did you spend your time?
Oh my goodness! With my older brother, we're 2 years apart. So growing up, we were very close. We were tight. Growing up in Wink, Texas, we moved. I was born in Odessa, but my dad working a lot, working the oil fields. He traveled a lot, so we moved to Wink, Texas, the home of Roy Orbison, and we just had the best of times. We, we were typical kids, whether typical white or Hispanic or whatever you want to call it. We, in the summer times, we would go out hunting. My brother Joe had a .22 rifle. We would go out in the oil fields. We would shoot rabbits. We would take matches. We would kill the rabbits. We would skin them. We would eat them out in the country. There was some oil camps out there that at this time, this would have been in the early 60s. There were some oil camps where the oil people that worked out in the oil fields lived, but these were deserted, and there was one place that we would go to because it had a swimming pool, and we would go swimming in that deserted swimming pool. One of our one of our best adventures, if you want to call it that, was we were probably, I'm going to say 8 and 10. We couldn't have been much older than that. And we hitchhiked, my brother and I did, from Wink, Texas to Menton, Texas, which is a distance of 30 miles. All we took was our fishing gear. We took no water, we took no food, we took nothing, and we hitchhiked 30 miles at that age, and that we made it back alive by the grace of God, you know, that nobody kidnapped us, that we didn't, that whatever. I just, it's still one of our biggest adventures. As a matter of fact, I was visiting with my brother about 3 weeks ago, and we were discussing that road trip that one day.
Where were your favorite places to be?
To be? Well, during the summertime, we'd be at the swimming pool. Or there was a little, we call it a lake. It was what it was just a reservoir that would collect all the brine water from the oil pumps, and it would seep into this one area, and we would go swimming there. If we didn't want or didn't have money to go to the swimming pool, we would wind up at that at Wink Lake, if you want to call it that.
Let's move over to your parents. What did your parents do?
My mom was, she was a stay-home mama. She took care of us. My dad was, he worked in the oil field. My dad was not an educated man. He went to the 2nd grade. He took it upon himself to learn English. He could not read nor write, but yet he did extremely well in the oil field industry. He got to where he would run complete jobs from start to finish. He could not read blueprints, but he knew that oil field extremely well. When I got older and when my brother got older, we both worked for my dad. He taught us both to be, he taught us everything about the oil industry, or as far as the pipelining. He taught my brother Joe how to drive the Cyboom Caterpillar, and he taught me how to be a backhoe operator. So between the three of us, we could literally lay down a whole pipeline.
Do you know where they were born?
My dad was born in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Brother Joe and my younger brother were born, all three of us were, no, take it back. Myself and Joe were born in Odessa. My brother Frank was born in Kermitz.
You have named a couple of different locations. Can you explain a little bit why there are so many towns within your early life?
Again, as I said, my dad, since he worked in the oil field, he traveled a lot. And so as we were born in Odessa, and when he knew he was going to be going a lot of time, or most of the time, he took us to Wink, which is where my mom's father was, my grandfather lived. So we had a lot of family in Wink. And that's where I started. Actually, I started 1st grade in Odessa, and then we moved to Wink, and then restarted again in Wink. And we went to school in Wink. From let me see, I was in the from the 1st through the 4th grade in Wink, and then after that, after the 4th year or 4th grade, we moved to Hagerman, New Mexico. Hard times.
Why do you say that? If you're comfortable talking about it.
We were poor. We were very poor people. My dad had a drinking problem. So when we moved to Hagerman, it was probably the worst year of my life. And my brother Joe will attest to that. It was just very difficult.
We're back after a brief interruption. I believe you were talking about Hagerman.
Yes, we left. My dad, at the time, he had a drinking problem. So the summer of '62, he came from wherever it was that he was working. We were living in Wink, and he said, we're moving to New Mexico. So he picked us up. We took what little belongings we had. We moved to Hagerman, New Mexico. We moved in with some distant relatives. and I was starting the 5th grade in Hagerman, so we were there for the 1 year. At the end of that year, he had run across a friend of his that was working on a ranch in the Penasco Valley in New Mexico, about 60 miles, I believe, west of Artesia. So he uprooted us from Hagerman and took us to the Penasco Valley, or the Runyon Ranch, which was a working apple orchard, and they also had cattle and sheep. So this would have been, I started, they had a little 2-room schoolhouse there at the Penasco Valley. I started the 6th grade there, and that was in 1963, and the reason I remember that was November 22nd, 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated. We were on our lunch break, and we were out playing basketball, shooting baskets, when our principal, the school teacher, he was a principal and teacher, he came out and told us what had happened, and so we all went inside to listen to the news on the radio. And that's how I found out, or how we heard about the assassination. And as I said, in 1963.
Tell me a little bit about your mom. What do you remember most about her?
Mom was, she was very strong. She, as I said, times were tough financially. We were poor people. So, but she always managed to provide for us whatever we needed. If my dad had some money, if he worked some odd jobs, he would give her, after he finished his drinking binges, whatever was left, he would give over to the household. And she would always manage to squirrel away a couple of dollars. So whenever we needed some things, she would have some money set aside. She was just, she was a very strong-willed woman.
And your dad, how do you remember him?
My dad, I remember him as he was a hard worker. Whenever he worked, my dad was not afraid to work. He worked, when we moved to the Runyon Ranch there in the Penasco Valley, he took over as ranch foreman. It was, like I said, it was a working ranch, but it had a series of apple orchards in the surrounding area. And Dad and the crew that we had there on the ranch, they built a large apple facility, apple processing facility, and he undertook and did the whole construction of the piece with no outside help. And again, as I said, this was just with a 2nd grade education.
Are there any traditions that you feel like your mom and dad passed down to you?
Not really. The one thing that I took from my dad, as did my older brother and my younger brother, was a very strong work ethic. That's one of the main things that we took away from our dad. And the second thing that I took away, and my brother Joe, my older brother Joe, and I'm assuming that my brother Frank that passed away, was the fact that we were not going to go down the same road as my dad, which was being basically a functioning alcoholic. And he was also, at times he could be, he was mean to my mom. He was an abuser of my mom. So that was one of the bigger things that we took away from growing up with Dad, was we weren't going to go down that road. And I think we succeeded.
Do you have an idea of where your parents came from, where they were born?
Vaguely, growing up as kids, you don't think about your parents as being people. You just take them for granted. So I knew that Mom was born in Texas. I knew that my dad was born in Carlsbad, but this was way after the fact. But no, we just, looking back now on it, I wish there had been so many more questions that we would have asked as far as their childhood, where they came from, where our grandparents came from, that type of thing.
About what years were they born?
Early 20s, 23, I believe.
So that would put your dad and his generation around World War II, possibly Korea?
World War II.
Was your dad in the military, or he had?
My dad was in the military for a very short time. He was in long enough to basically get VA benefits. He he knew that. And now, why they took him? Let's back up. Why they took him in the first place, I don't know, because he didn't. I think he just went basically to the second grade. So as far as being able to read, because as an older man, he could not read, he could not write. So I don't know that he was any better off back in the 40s doing the same thing. So, but he was still drafted. And what surprised me about my dad, 30 years later, when you go into the military, they have this uniform code of military justice, and they have these things that you have to memorize, that you remember. And he still remembered them 30 years later. But he memorized a lot of stuff. And I think that's how he managed to do so well in the oil field industry. But anyway, my dad went through boot camp, and he didn't want to go to Germany. He knew he didn't want to go during the occupation. And he picked his nose till it bled, and it bled, and it bled, and it bled. So they gave him honorable discharge under medical conditions, and that was how he got out of serving in the Army.
Do you know what he went back to do?
At the time, he was not working in the oil industry. My dad left home at the age of 12 or 13, I believe it was, because his stepfather, his mom had remarried, and his stepfather was mean to him because it wasn't his son. So my dad did odd jobs. He was, at the time, I believe he was working in a bakery. So I think when he got back out of the Army, I think he went back to work in a bakery, but he knew that he couldn't. There was no future in that, and I think that's when he started going. He went out and started working in the oil industry, in the pipeline industry, as a regular labor hand. But then he knew he did not want to do that all his life, being out there with a shovel. So he took it upon himself to learn the trade, the heavy equipment operator. He would question the guys. At the time, you have to understand that all Hispanics, as pretty much as it is today, they were labor people. And my dad didn't want to be with a shovel all the time. So he would ingratiate himself with the white folk. You know, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you operate this? How do you operate that? And from there, he just took off. And he was accepted. He was one of very few, at the time, one of very few heavy equipment operators, and then later on, one of even less Mexican supervisors, people, Hispanic, that would run an entire job with my brother and my help. Because we helped, whenever Dad had any questions, we would do, as far as writing reports, as far as doing the payroll, as far as doing any of that, my brother and I stepped up to that and helped him out.
Given your dad's history that you just shared with us, military and work ethic, do you think your attitudes about the country are the same or different than your parents growing up?
I like to think they were better. We knew that, I don't know, if our station in life, as far as, like I said, you know, you have your Anglos, your whites up here, and you have the Hispanics and blacks and everybody else down here. We knew that we needed some sort of education. Unfortunately, we didn't pursue it as much as you and your sister did, but it's just one of those things that at the time, education or higher education for me, when I graduated high school, I look back upon it now, and I don't remember the school resources people coming up to me and saying, "Rudy, what are you going to do after graduation?" I do not remember a counselor approaching me and discussing higher education. And again, in '68, this was pretty much Vietnam was about midpoint at that time. So the only thing that I was expecting was going to be being drafted eventually.
Why do you think they didn't approach you about what you were going to do after high school?
I honestly don't know. I really, really do not know, because the other Hispanics and my other classmates went on to be to college. Some of them returned back to Artesia to be teachers. So I really don't know. I don't know if they singled me out because I wasn't from Artesia originally. I hope not. But I really don't know. I've thought about that, and I don't know.
Do you think the expectations and opportunities were different for you than for your parents?
Just a little bit better, not much, and that only by the reason that we did go to school and that we did graduate high school. But other than that, no. I don't think they expected that much more out of us. As a matter of fact, on your mom's side, when she graduated high school, her counselor told her, you don't have to worry about going to higher education, because basically you're just going to wind up pregnant and barefoot. Literally was what they told her. And this was in '68.
Did you receive any overt comments like that from any of your educators or parents or peers?
No, did not.
What languages did you and do you speak?
English, which I learned in school. Spanish I learned at my mom's knee. But the English that we learned, both, or all three of us, we learned it in grade school, going to public schools. Now, Frank, being younger, by this time, both Joe and I, we spoke English and Spanish all the time. So Frank picked up the English from us. So he had an advance as far as being able to speak English when he started public schools.
And Spanish, learning that from your mom, did they read in Spanish, watch TV in Spanish, or where was that?
All of the above. I remember, she taught us our prayers, of course, in Spanish. That was probably the first thing she taught us. The reading we would pick up on her because she would read to us. And then when we were young, when we were still kids living in Odessa, I remember my dad, whenever he had the money and was not drinking, he would actually take us to the drive-in, and we would watch Mexican or Spanish movies. So I remember a lot of those movies with Cantinflas and Antonio Aguilar and all these other people that were so very popular back in the day, again in the mid-'60s.
We mentioned your dad going to school till about the second grade. Do you have an idea of your mom's education?
I don't think she did. I don't think she went to school at all.
Do you have any idea where she might have picked up her ability to read?
Well, the Spanish, I'm assuming she probably learned either from her mom or her grandfather, or her father rather, my grandfather.
About how old were they when they passed? About how old were you when they passed away?
Well, my mom died in '92, so I would have been, 57 or so? And my dad passed away when he was 96, so this was just like about 10 years ago, so I was in my late 60s.
Let's go back to your school years. You had talked about 1963 and remembering Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
When you think back on that school time, was there a diverse population? Was it predominantly one race or ethnic group?
In '63, when we moved to Peñasco Valley, or the Sierra, we refer to the Sierra because there's some mountains there. The little school that I went to at that time, and I went there for 1 year in '63, it was a two-room schoolhouse. I think it was first, second, and third grade, one teacher, and then fourth, fifth, and sixth, which was the graduating class. Once the sixth grade graduated, which was the class that I was in, then we would be bused into Artesia, which was 60 miles away. But in our class at that time, it was myself, and there was Lyndall Jernigan, Ernest Harwell, Fergie Deline Joy, and Virginia Ornelas. Of the five of us that went that year, I'm the only one that's still alive. Everybody else has died. So I'm the surviving member of that class of 63 from Peñasco Valley.
Why does that come to mind?
I think it was the turning point, as I said, the low point of our life, or my life anyway, was when we lived in Hagerman, which was in 62, moving to Peñasco Valley in 63. At this point in time, when we were living in the mountains in Peñasco Valley, my dad, there was an episode where a friend of his died, his drinking buddy died, and it was at this point that my dad went from drinking all the time to where he just quit. And as I told you earlier, my mom would always have a little money set aside, and he went up to her and he said, "Do you have some money? I'm going to go see if there's any work out in the oil industry." So she had 40, 50 bucks or whatever it was, gave it to him. He took off, he hitchhiked, and from there his fortunes changed, and it got to the point where the opportunity came that we had, it was either again follow Dad, and Mom said no. She said, let's go to Artesia, which was the closest town to where we lived out in the mountains. And she said, I want to find a house, and we're going to move. She said, I'm going to move to Artesia. And she said, that's where I'm going to stay. She said, you can go wherever you want to. I'm not moving anymore. So we went. They found a house, and that was a turning point for Mom, where she said, no más. Yeah, that's it.
And about what grade were you in when you went to Artesia?
Well, we still lived out in the mountains for a couple of years. We caught the bus. I was in the 7th grade. So I think we went 7th and 8th grade, still went on the bus. And it was a 2-hour bus ride both ways. The bus would pick us up at about 7 o'clock in the morning. We would get to the school almost as the bell went off, and then we'd go, of course, to classes, and in the afternoon we had the long ride back to home. And then I think it was probably 65, 66 when we moved to Artesia proper. Joe, my older brother, stayed out in the ranch that we were growing up in. He never did live in the house that we moved to in Artesia.
You mentioned a long bus ride. Where did that commitment come from? Why didn't you just stay home or drop out?
Oh gosh, with us, it was not that it wasn't an option, because we could have, but our folks, if we went to school or didn't go to school, it really was inconsequential to them. It was just something that we basically, I guess we just knew that we needed to do or had to do.
And when you say we, who comes to mind with that we?
Both myself and my 2 brothers. And especially my older brother, because Frank, he was about 7 years younger than both myself and Joe. I think his future was pretty much planned out. Once we moved to Artesia proper, well, he was welcome to Artesia, and even though he was born in Texas, he loved New Mexico. He loved New Mexico till his dying days, much to my chagrin.
What was New Mexico like?
New Mexico, I guess the only good thing about it was we were all in the same boat. And when I say we, I'm talking about all the Hispanics. We were all poor. We were all lower class citizens. So we were all in the same boat. Now, some of the things, of course, that some of my peers at the time, the kids that I knew, some of the things that they had going for them, though, was most of their dads were stay-at-home dads. Now, they didn't have the best of jobs. They worked out in the it's agriculture at the time. It was alfalfa. It was a lot of just produce in general. So their parents, most of their parents worked in the farms, and those that didn't, they either worked like at service stations, pumping gas and that type of thing. So we were all just, as I said, just lower class citizens.
How did that translate into the classroom? What did school look like?
School was, again, even though we were segregated, we still knew the blacks, and there are very few blacks, but Hispanics versus whites. thing that comes to mind would be like whenever we got snow in the wintertime, we would have snowball fights, and it would be the Hispanics on one side of the street and the Anglos on the other side of the street. We would get snow, make snowballs. We would put rocks inside of them and lob them at each other. That type of stuff. During the summertime, or in the spring, when we had a swimming pool in the small little town of Artesia. We had a swimming pool, so we had swimming as a elective in PE, and we would play water polo. And of course, the white kids would try to dunk us. They would hold us under the water and that type of stuff.
Tell me more about segregation, because this was before desegregation was federal law.
Mm-hmm.
How did that play out in the classroom?
In the classrooms, we all got to sit together and whatnot. But I remember when in junior high, Park Junior High, this would have been the school year of 64 and 65. We were the first class to go into this new junior high. It was called Park Junior High, and what was unique about it was all underground. But the reason that comes to mind was the one year that I was there, for whatever reason, there was this white guy did not like me. I have no reason, no idea why he didn't like me, but he was forever taunting me, calling me whatever name he could think of. And back then, they taught driver's education in junior high. So I was taking driver's ed, and the teacher had taken some students out to go driving. And as I'm sitting there with some of the other kids, along comes my nemesis, and he starts calling me every name in the book. So got up, we went to the restroom, and had a fight. And of course, even now, I'm 5'6" now, so you can imagine how tall I was in the 7th grade. And this guy, well, looking back on him now, I thought he was 7 foot tall. But anyway, he beat the heck out of me, and he still wasn't happy. But anyway, that was the only fight that I had, and I don't know whether he got it out of his system. But like I said, he never approached me again for a fight. But he just continued to browbeat me and just call me whatever he wanted to.
Were there any consequences from the administration, teachers?
Zero. It was handled in-house. It was me and him in the restroom, and that was it.
What was the representation of the teachers in the classroom and administration? Were they reflective of your background or another?
All Anglo. The only teacher that I can remember being Hispanic was a Spanish teacher by the name of Martinez, and he came in. This would have been my junior and senior year. But other than that, I don't remember there being any other Hispanics available as far as teachers.
Again, it prompts the question to me, given the nature of the climate in the school, why did you continue to go?
I just knew that it was for my own personal satisfaction to graduate high school. I had no aspirations. I had no. I never gave it a second thought about continuing education once I graduated from high school, because again, I graduated in '68. This was during the Vietnam era, and when I graduated, and as I said, I never had anybody approach me to ask me, well, have you signed up? Have you chosen any schools? Have you done anything? And I hadn't. So when I graduated in '68, I basically just stayed at home. I would do little odd jobs and just not do anything. And I told myself that if I didn't hear from the draft board the following year, which would be '69, that I would then pursue and see what universities or what college or whatever would be available for me to then look into. But prior to that, I never even considered higher education.
Were you involved in any clubs or activities?
No, just going out and drinking with my buddies in the evenings. That was it. That was the only aspirations I had at the time.
Well, were there any other things that you did with your buddies after school?
I love pool. I love to play billiards. I guess one of the saving graces now, going back to Hagerman, the worst year of my life, when we moved from Wink, Texas to Hagerman, one of the first things that I noticed was that there was a pool hall there, and there was kids coming out of the pool hall that had been there playing pool. And this was, again, we would have been 12, 13 years old, and oh my gosh, that was, I fell in love with billiards. I played billiards from then on. I worked at the pool hall. I literally ate and slept at the pool hall. And so when we left Hagerman up to the Sierra to Peñasco Valley, there was that interim that I missed it, except when we would go into Artesia for clothing or whatever, that I would go to the pool halls and play some more games. And so when we moved back to, when we moved to Artesia from the mountains, I spent the bigger part of my time at the pool hall. Just loved it.
Did you have a job there?
I did growing up. Well, in Hagerman, I used to do the tables. I would get, I think it was a nickel a game. Whenever they would finish a game, they would holler rack. So I would go over there and rack up the balls, and then I'd collect the money because back then they didn't pay by the hour. Back then they paid by the game. So they would give me the money to go pay for the game that they had finished playing. So yes, I worked at the pool halls.
Did you have any other jobs besides working for your dad or with your dad in the oil field and picking up some time at the pool halls?
No, that was it. Well, now, again, when we lived in Hagerman, again, that was very agrarian, cotton being the cash crop there. So we picked cotton there. We picked a lot of cotton in Hagerman. Then when we moved to Peñasco Valley or there at the Runyon Ranch, they had a working apple orchard. So and I say we because it was me and my brother Joe. And then we had met some friends already. We had met some people, younger kids our age from Artesia. So they would come down on weekends, and we would pick apples. Depending on what was in season, we would pick apples. If it wasn't apple season, if it was in the fall time, and here we are, junior high and high school kids, and we would be out there pruning the trees, taking care of the apple orchards, and not without any supervision. And we did well. We did well.
Did you ever miss any school to do agricultural work?
No, never did. Never. We always managed to attend school the allotted times that we had to. Yeah.
So you graduate from high school. You give yourself a year timeline to think about going into college or get drafted. What happened?
I got a draft notice. It would have been either late '68 or early '69. It would have been very early '69. I get this notice that I need to present myself to, I don't remember if it was in Carlsbad, but anyway, or they sent me a ticket that I had to go to El Paso for my military physical. So when the time came, I went to El Paso with some other people. I don't even remember, it's been so long. But I went to El Paso, I passed my physical, and they sent me home, and they said, you'll be notified when it's time for you to report. So again, I don't remember when exactly, but I got my draft notice that I had passed my physical, that I was eligible for being drafted, which I was. So as soon as I got my draft notice, I hightailed it. At the time, back when I thought I went to Carlsbad, but I actually had my draft little card from Navy recruiter from Hobbs, New Mexico. So I went to Hobbs, and I enlisted in the Navy. When you got drafted, it was 2 years of service in the Army. But if you volunteered, it was 4 years. But my thought process was that I had a better chance, again in 1969, my thought process was that I had a better chance of surviving the Vietnam conflict 4 years in the Navy as opposed to 2 years in the Army. I figured that if I was drafted and I went 2 years in the Army, that my first duty call would be in Vietnam. So I didn't want to take that chance.
Was that the running sentiment when you were in high school, coming of age during the time of Vietnam?
That we were wind up there? Oh yeah, I referred to it as my sword of Damocles. It was just something that, now we never grew up, we didn't talk about it because when we lived, we knew that there was a war going on, but when we lived in the Penasco Valley, there was no television, radio was very sporadic, so we really didn't know what was going on that much. So we would come into town and we would hear the rumblings about Vietnam. We would hear about it. So along probably 65, 66, when Joe, my older brother, graduated, we were already living in Artesia, so we knew about the war then. My brother Joe was drafted. He went in 2 years, and he was sent to Germany. Or that's the impression that I have. I have since talked to a friend that was a friend of both mine and Joe, and one day he mentioned something. He said something to the effect, well, he says, how do you know that that's where he went to, that he was in Germany, that he didn't go to Vietnam? And so I don't know, and I haven't spoken to Joe about it, and I intend to, but it led me to believe, and I said, well, to myself, maybe Joe did go to Vietnam, and he was wounded, and they sent him to Germany to recover, but he might have told the people, don't let my family know that I was wounded. I don't know. But when the time came that it was up for me to go, and then I volunteered for the 4-year Navy stint, and which would have been, and I went into to boot camp May the 20th of 1969. It was a 10-week process at the time.
How did your mom take both your brother and you being drafted into Vietnam?
I don't remember that much about how she processed Joe being gone, but I know that it hit her very hard when I was going, because by this time, when I was drafted or got my draft notice, brother Joe was already back home. And then she knew, even though the news, she didn't pay attention to the news because everything that we watched was in English, although I don't even remember. I'm sure she listened to Spanish radio, and they probably discussed the thing that was going on in Vietnam. And then there was a family down the street from where we lived that had a brother or a son that was Joe's age, and he had joined the Marine Corps, and he had been wounded. And I remember the way his mom reacted to his injury, and then mom and this lady were friends. So yeah, she knew it was bad. She knew it was bad.
And your younger brother, did he ever mention that time in his life?
No, because he was so much younger. By the time he came of age, Vietnam was long gone. As a matter of fact, he never even had the opportunity or whatever you want to call it, as far as having to serve. I think they had done away with the draft at the time.
So you went into the Navy?
Yes, got my tickets to report to San Diego on May the 20th of 1969. My mom dropped me off at the bus depot there in Artesia. I caught a bus from Artesia to Roswell. Then from Roswell, we caught stayed on the bus to Albuquerque, and then we got on a plane from Albuquerque into San Diego. First time on a plane, first time being away from family, first time doing anything by myself.
What was that like?
It was an adventure. You know, there was a guy from Roswell, and he was He was only in the reserve, but he still had to go through the same training as I did. But once we finished boot camp, he was going to come back home, and he was done. Me and everybody else that was there, we had from there. We after graduation from boot camp, then we were assigned our positions as to where we were going to go once we finished our 10-week training.
Where were you assigned?
The first assignment was when we went into boot camp. Of course, the first thing they did was, I think the main thing that they wanted to do was to show us how to march in step, how to work as a unit, because every chance we had, or every opportunity they gave them, we were out there marching. So we got to, what we were doing was building up from when we got there to graduation, where we would pass in review, which was beautiful. You know, we'd have all these graduates, all the different units that were finishing, and it was really neat. But even though we made strong friendships the 10 weeks that we were together, and the same would hold true for when I was on the ship and when I went to Okinawa, I never took it upon myself to get anybody's addresses. When I left boot camp, we were just sent out, and we went to where we were meant to go. We had aptitude tests, and for whatever reason, I guess it said that Moreno had an aptitude for electronics. So they sent me to FTA school, which was fire control technician, and fire control technician were those people that were in charge of the armaments on a ship, as far as the guns, how to direct them, how to coordinate designate where the bombs were going to locate. So they sent me to Bainbridge, Maryland in '69, would have been around July into August. And Rudy Moreno didn't do well in school. And he tried, and he just couldn't get the electrical part of it there with the AC, the DC, the voltage, the amps, and all of this stuff. So he flunked out. And they said, Rudy, you're just, you're not going to cut it. We're going to have to send you off to the fleet. So I said, okay. So I got my marching orders, and they sent me to the ship that I was on, the James C. Owens, USS James C. Owens, DD 776. First Division. First Division being those people that are in charge of taking care of the ship, the painting, the making sure that everything was up to code. That's how I wound up on the ship. Was my training as far as FTA school, I flunked out, which I guess was a blessing.
So let's compare then and now. Do you remember how that made you feel then?
I had 3 days to report from Bainbridge, Maryland to the ship. So they gave me my travel voucher, and they gave me some money to stay at a hotel. And as a matter of fact, I think I still have the pay receipt where I stayed at a Holiday Inn. At the time, to me, that was the most the best hotel that I could have stayed in. Looking back on it now. But anyway, I went. And I stayed at that hotel for those 3 days, and I finally reported on board when I couldn't stay any longer. And it was a good transition. I was on, as I said, it was First Division, and First Division was what they called the bosun's mates. Bosun's mates being those people, as I said, were in charge of taking care of how the ship looked, the painting, make sure everything, the doors were working, that type of thing. So this would have been August, September, possibly into October. Then we heard that our ship that we were going to go from Charleston, South Carolina. We were going to be going on a Westpac cruise to Vietnam. So we started preparing, getting ready to go on our Westpac cruise. I've been on cruises after I got out of the Navy, and the cruises that I've been on compared to the cruise that we went in 1960 or 70 are nothing to compare really. But anyway, when before we left, we would go out what they called on sea trials. We would go out, make sure that everybody knew what their battle stations were, everybody knew what they were supposed to do when we got to Vietnam. The ship at that time was home ported in Charleston, South Carolina. So there were some people on there that were what they called short timers. Short timers being those sailors, those enlisted people that were on the ship that were not going to re-enlist, that did not have enough time left on their enlistment to complete a 6-month tour. So the guy that was running the post office at the time, he was a short timer. They needed somebody in the post office. So they had gone through the roster of those people that were there that didn't have a designation, and they pulled up mine, and I guess they saw that I had qualified for some kind of clerical, that I had an aptitude for clerical. So they approached me and asked me if I would like to be the postal clerk. I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I was drafted from 1st Division, the bosun mate, doing all this menial stuff, for an on-the-job training as a postal clerk. So the guy that was there that was getting ready to leave, he showed me the basics. And I don't remember if it was a month, 2 months, or 3 months, but I know that by the time we left in March of 1970, it was all on me. And I was the postal clerk for the ship.
What was that like?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I had my own little office. It was probably no bigger than a public toilet, but I had it had a split door with the bars on the front. So whenever it was time for mail call, I would unlock the swinging door, and the bars would be up front, and they would come by and they would pick up their mail. They would deliver mail. If they needed packages sent off, I would do that. If they needed money orders, I sold the money orders. It was a very cushy job. It was a very cushy job. I enjoyed it.
Do you have any recollections of providing communications to your shipmates?
As far as?
Was there anything touching? Did it have anything to do with connecting back home? Was there any kind of relevance to the mail?
Well, I was either A, the most loved guy, or B, the most hated guy, depending on what kind of mail they got when they got, if they got a Dear John letter, well, of course they wanted to blame me for it. But one of the responsibilities as the postal clerk was whenever we went anywhere, whether we were out at sea or we were in port, when we got to wherever we were going, or if we were again, mail was delivered to us by helicopter, when everybody else had cleaned up and done everything that they needed to do to prepare the ship for the next day, they could go on liberty, especially if we were in port. I, on the other hand, had to stay and sort the mail. I had to, the mail that came in that was waiting for us, because the mail was shipped to the different locations that we would be stopping, so our mail was waiting for us there. So I was responsible to go pick up the mail, sort it out, and then distribute the mail to all the divisions on the ship. And then once that was done, then I could go on Liberty Call.
What did Liberty Call look like for you?
Oh my gosh, getting drunk. Not just me, everybody. That if we were going to be in port for a couple of days, well, we would take it a little bit slower. If we were going to be on port for just a couple of hours, we'd go in there and drink as fast and furious as we could. Now, we would pay the price later on, but yeah, it seems like we all just lived for that, or I did anyway at the time, me and my buddies.
Why do you think that was?
Well, at the time, the drinking age, and I think it's still the same. I think drinking age is still 21, and then I was 19 when I went into boot camp. I turned 20 in boot camp. I wasn't 21 till I was off the coast of Vietnam. So just the fact that we could go out and get drunk, and nobody would say anything to us, we took advantage of it, and it got me in trouble once.
Tell me about that.
Oh my gosh! At this time, we were in Hawaii. I'll go to Hawaii, but at the time, I think times have changed now. The non-commissioned officers were not allowed to have civilian clothes on the ship. It was all military uniform. So whenever we went out, we left the ship in military clothes. Now, what we would do, especially like when we were in Hawaii, that we were going to be there a while, they had these places where you could rent lockers on a weekly, monthly basis, and you'd go out and buy your civilian clothes, so you would have clothes that you could change out to from military into civilian clothes. So this one time that I got drunk, super drunk, not drunk enough that I got a tattoo, but I never did get that drunk. Anyway, that's a running joke. But anyway, I got so drunk that I'm coming back on board ship, and when you come on board ship, you have the gangplank. The ship is here, and you're here, and they have a gangplank that you walk across, and you request permission to come aboard. So I requested permission to come aboard, and the guy that was there, first-class gunners, may still remember his name, by the name of Seiler. He said, "Moreno, you can't come aboard. You're wearing civilian clothes." And I said, "But I need to get back." He said, "No, you can't do it. You're in civilian clothes." So when I finally took it to heart, I turned around and I said, "Seiler," and he turns around and I flipped him the bird. So I went back, changed, and I'm assuming I got back and fell asleep. Next day I found out that I'd been reported to the captain. So that led to a captain's mast. The captain's mast, it was myself and the captain and several officers, and they told them what had transpired. And the captain says, "Moreno," well, let me back up a little bit. I had a couple of officers that spoke on my behalf about how good a job I was doing, that I was a postal clerk, that I did this, did that. So after it was all said and done, the captain says, "Moreno, if these officers had not spoken in your behalf, I would have ordered a court-martial, which would have led for me either being dishonorably discharged or kicked out of the Navy completely." So I thanked the captain, and my punishment was I was restricted to the confines of the ship for half a month, and I was fined half a month's pay. So I didn't leave the ship for 15 days, and I stayed on board ship. It didn't stop me from drinking. I just handled it a little bit better. Now, when we left Charleston, we passed through Panama. When we passed the Panama Canal, we wound up in Manzanillo, Mexico. So they in both of those places, they needed somebody that spoke Spanish. There was a lieutenant on board ship by the name of Garcia from Albuquerque, didn't speak Spanish. There was another young guy, his name was Vasquez, didn't speak Spanish. And I think I was the third one. I was the ship's translator when we crossed the Panama Canal, when they needed some translating being done as far as when we needed, if we needed. As a matter of fact, one instance was I think it was in Panama, that they wanted to get ice cream for the crew, and I helped them get the ice cream for that. So we crossed Panama Canal, and then in Manzanillo también, I helped them get some supplies that we needed in Manzanillo, Mexico, due to my Spanish, that I could speak it.
What was the diversity like on your ship? What was the composition?
I would say it's probably 70% Anglo. There was there was about 276 of us on the ship. As I said earlier, there was 3 Hispanics, myself included. There was maybe 8 to 10 blacks. They had some Filipinos. The Filipinos, though, at that time, were mostly, their duties were relegated to service of the officers. Their duties were to take care of the officers only. They didn't mingle with the rest of the crew. They took care of the officers' quarters. They took care of pressing the officers' uniforms. They took care of making the meals for the officers. That was all the Filipinos did. Everything else was relegated to blacks, especially. Even then, they were doing like the laundry. They were doing the ship's barber was black. The ship's launderer was black. And like I said, there was maybe about 10 or so blacks and 3 Hispanics, and the rest were white, out of 276 people roughly.
Was the ship segregated?
No, we were all cool. We had a great time. Now, for whatever reason, I had been around black people in Artesia, but not that closely. When I came on board ship, they embraced me. The black people embraced me. They loved Rudy. And I loved them back, and I still think very fondly of those guys. As a matter of fact, I'm friends on Facebook with 2 that I managed to find through the miracle of Facebook 45 years later, and we still stay in contact with some of those black guys.
What about on land? Since you were in the Navy, did you spend much time, or were you ever housed on land?
Not when I was on the ship. When I was on the ship, we lived, breathed, bathed. We did everything on the ship. It wasn't until I got to Okinawa that I lived off base, or that I had shore duty. But while I was in the Navy or on the ship, everything was done on the ship.
Did you have any interactions with the local indigenous population?
In Hawaii, no. They hated the military in Hawaii. In Okinawa, yes. When I had shore duty in Okinawa, yes. But this was years down the road.
Why did you have shore duty years down the road and not in Hawaii?
When we got back from Vietnam, our ship was going to be decommissioned. What that means was the ship at that time was like 30 years old, so they were going to pull it out of service. So my captain at that time asked me if I would like to go to postal clerk school in San Diego. Postal clerk school being where I would get formal training to continue doing what I was doing. So he gave me that opportunity, and I said yes, I'd love to go. So I went from our ship being decommissioned. When we got back from Vietnam in November of 1970, then I went to postal clerk school in San Diego for my formal training, and from there I graduated. I did so well, graduated second in my class. And they said that you've done so well, Moreno, that you have your choice of duty station. And they said, where would you like to go? I said, young and foolish as I was 21, I said, I'd like shore duty in Vietnam. So they checked and they said, oh, we're starting to de-escalate. We're doing troop withdrawal. We don't need anybody in Vietnam. They said, but if say that you go someplace else and the war kicks back up, would you be willing to extend, say that you've got 4 months to go, but would you be willing to extend your time so that you could do a full tour, which would be 6 months duty in Vietnam? And I said, yeah. As a matter of fact, I still have that paper that I signed. They had me sign a paper saying that I would volunteer for an additional extension. So anyway, when they said, okay, what other place would you like to go? I said, what's the furthest duty station that they need somebody? And they typed in there. They said, Okinawa, Japan. I said, I'll take it. So when I get back to the barracks where my friends were that I had met, and the strange thing is, though, I have no recollection, zero recollection of Postal Clerk A School. I don't remember any of the guys. I don't remember anything about it. But anyway, I do know that they said, well, gosh, Moreno, why didn't you say, oh, I want to go to Corpus Christi, or I want to go to Albuquerque, I want to go wherever. Why Okinawa, Japan? I said, I can see those places in the States anytime I want to. I said, when am I going to get the opportunity to go to Okinawa, Japan? So that's how I wound up in Okinawa.
Did you ever see active combat when you were in the Navy?
As far as me shooting somebody, me killing somebody, no. But we saw active duty on the ship. We went on what they call the Westpac cruise, and that was a 6-month deployment to Vietnam. We left May. I think in our cruise book it says it was from June through November. It seemed like we left way late in May or early June, and then we wound up on the gun line eventually off the coast of Vietnam. The closest that we got was 2 miles out. We were close enough that when we were that close, if we wanted to be outside the ship, we had to stay on the opposite of the shore because of the sniper shooting back at us. So that was as close as we got, but we did a lot of shore bombardment. We lobbed over 3,000 rounds of 5-inch 38 rounds into the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army.
So when you were on land in Okinawa, how long were you there?
I was there about 15 months. I was there would have been mid-71 to February of 1973, give or take.
And did you have any interaction with the communities there?
Other than the post office that I was assigned to in Okinawa, they had 3 foreign nationals that worked there. And that was about as close of an interaction as I had was with those guys there. Now, the island of Okinawa was so small that the speed limit on the island, the whole island, was 30 miles per hour. So I bought me a bicycle, and that's I used, on my days off when I was not drinking with my buddies, I would get on my bicycle and I would ride the countryside. And I've got a bunch of pictures of where I went to they had a bunch of shrines there. They had a bunch of monuments dedicated to those people that had died during the Okinawan War, during the Second World War. One place that comes to mind was called the Virgin Leap, because they had instilled in all of the Okinawan women that once the GIs got to Okinawa, they were going to rape, plunder, and pillage, and just take advantage of the women. So what they did when the military got to Okinawa during World War II, they took all the women, herded themselves. They went to this cliff, and they jumped off the cliff because of what they were thinking was going to happen to them. But it didn't come to bear. But anyway, one day I was out riding my bicycle. This would have been 72. And I see this old fisherman out there. And I don't remember if he was casting a net or had a pole. And why I took it upon myself to stop. I stopped and I visited with him. And it turns out that this guy, he was an older guy. He had been stationed in Cuba as a youth, so he spoke Spanish. So we visited in Spanish. You know, out of all the people that were there on Okinawa, for me to run across this one guy, and I never saw him again, but it seemed like we had a good visit, just a chance visit. An Okinawan that had gone to Cuba, learned Spanish, so that he would be able to speak with me when I showed up there in 1972.
Do you have any other memories that stand out of cultural interactions?
Yes, one of the postal workers there that was from Okinawa, his wife had given birth to a son, and myself, and there was, I'm assuming they invited some of the other military personnel that were in the post office at the time to this birthing party that he was giving, and I went, and seemed like there was one of the black petty officers that also went, and the women were in one room and the guys were in another room, and we just had the most fun time. You know, they had food, they had music, There's a couple of pictures of me dancing out there with one of the guys. We got out there, and they were playing their dinky-dink music, and I was out there dancing with them. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun.
Do you remember transitioning back home?
Yeah, that was a booger. This would have been when, in '72, they were starting to since the Vietnam War was coming to an end, they were starting to de-escalate. They were starting to do troop withdrawal. They were also letting guys go, those that weren't going to re-enlist. They were giving them a 3-month early out. So they called me in. The commanding officer called me in and asked me if I was going to re-enlist, and I had already spoken to a recruitment officer, and I had told him at the time that I was not. So he said, okay. He said, you qualify for a 3-month early out. So I said, okay. He said, he said, you need to do 3 things. And I said, okay. At the time, my hair was longer than regulation, my beard was longer than regulation, and I was sporting an earring. He said, you need to remove that earring. He said, you need to get a haircut and trim the beard. So while I was there, I took off my earring, put it in my pocket, and I said, I'll take care of the other 2 items. So that afternoon, I went and I trimmed my beard, got a haircut, this short. The following day, the commanding officer called me to his office, and he said, Moreno, you know that we could court-martial you. And I said, why? Because of your haircut. I said, but it's military regulation. I said, I just wanted to get one more haircut and not worry about it anymore. So he cut me some slack. But yeah, he, just exercising his authority. But it worked out well. So when I got my orders, when I was living on Okinawa, when I was a postal clerk there, we had the option to live off base. And they would give you a stipend where you could rent an apartment. So I put in for it, and I got the opportunity to live off base. So I had anybody that was over there, of course, you had to have your stereo system, your reel-to-reel, your cassette decks, and all of this kind of stuff. Big speakers. They didn't have those little ones like they do now. I had some speakers that weighed 40 pounds each. So when I was living off base and got my orders, they sent a truck, and they packed all of that stuff. They loaded all of that stuff up. The only thing that I was left with was the stuff that I was showed up with at the time, which was everything that would fit in my sea bag, and that was all my uniforms and just military stuff. That's all that I was left with. And from there, everything was shipped to the big crates were shipped to my home where Mom was living in Artesia at the time.
Do you remember what it was like? Do you remember the day you came back home?
Yeah. I crossed the gate. I was wearing my dress uniform. Back then, anytime that you traveled, you had to wear your dress blues. So this was February, which was fine because the weather was cool. I was wearing my dress uniform, my dress blues, and I presented my orders at the gate. Crossed the gate. I saluted the people there at the gate. Got to a taxi. This was in Corpus Christi, because they sent me from Okinawa, Japan to Corpus Christi because that was the closest. They asked me where I wanted to be separated from, and I said, oh, well, I'm going to wind up in Odessa, so Corpus Christi was the closest place. So when I crossed the gate, I got into a cab, told them to take me to the nearest service station that had a restroom, went to the service station, took off my uniform because of the disrespect that the people had still for military at the time. They were still blaming us as the military. They were blaming us for the war. We weren't there because we wanted to. We had gone because we had been sent there, whether we volunteered or by choice or whatever. So I took off my uniform and never put it on again. So the temperature there was still, as far as being stateside, it was still, you still had a lot of protests. You still had a lot of people that were anti-military. And that's one of the reasons for this ball cap. The ball cap I wear for 2 reasons, and that's to be recognized. not by the population in general, but by those that served. And we greet each other with, welcome back. Because nobody welcomed us back. Nobody. The second reason I wear it, it's a big finger for those people that see me wearing this hat will know that I went, I served, and I came back. And it's a big fuck you to all of those people. Their parents, because, you know, we've got older people my age and well, not too many older, that again, disrespected us for doing our duty. So that's what I remember mostly about when I left the Navy, was having to take off my uniform. I actually feared for my life, not that I was embarrassed of the uniform, but I was more fearful for my life, for some retribution, that type of stuff.
Has the climate changed now currently for you going out in public wearing your Vietnam?
Oh, yeah, I have a lot of people thanking me for my service, and what I tell them is, I say it was my duty and an obligation, and I was proud to have served. I don't thank them for them. I say it was an obligation. It was a responsibility that I was very happy to do. My country asked me to do it. I did it. No, I could have gone to Canada. I could have gone to Mexico and blended in. I spoke Spanish, so I could have gone into Mexico, but that wasn't who I was meant to be. And so, yeah, I was not going to shirk my responsibility. I was going to serve with pride.
What does patriotism mean to you?
Patriotism means that, you would give your life for your country. You sign on there that you would do that, regardless of what the consequences were. And, as an American, because I don't consider myself Hispanic, I don't consider myself anything other than an American, because that's what I am, with Hispanic roots.
Given the discrimination, given your experience growing up, where does that love for America come from?
It's the greatest country on earth. Just love it. It's awesome. Wouldn't do anything else. It's just my country. Even with the way things are today, June 30th, 2025, with the current administration, especially more so. Couldn't be prouder.
Is there anything else that you would like shared for posterity?
I guess not, other than the appreciation that I have for my country. When we were on our cruise, we went to Taiwan, we went to Yokosuka, Japan, we went to the Philippines, we went to Hong Kong, and just the way those people lived compared to what I have been afforded, to what I have, and to hear some people say, oh, this sucks because of this, or that they badmouth whatever, public works or the electricity or whatever. The people that I got to see while we were deployed, or when I was stationed there in Okinawa, the way they lived, and the things that my country offers me and offers anybody else, shame on those that disparage my country.
Thank you, Dad, for your service. I love you very much.
It was an honor and a privilege.